Hello and welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. My name is Maddie, Kendra Nelson's COO, and today we'll be listening to episode 267, Am I Overreacting or Is There Something He's Not Telling Me? With Dr. Roland. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest with us, Dr. Roland Cochran, and he's the founder of the Successful Addict, a recovery group for high achievers and entrepreneurs who struggle with compulsive cheating and infidelity. He's also the author of the book, The High Achiever's Guide to Sexual Addiction Recovery, a proven blueprint for successful professionals to overcome sex and porn addiction. So thanks for coming on the show with us.
That is me. What a mouthful. Oh my gosh, a tongue twister. I didn't even mean to do that, right?
I know, how dare you? So tell us a little bit about you and your story and why you are in this space.
Oh my gosh. I'm unfortunately in this space for unfortunate reasons because something that I personally struggled with and drug my wife through, right? And so that's why I say it's an ugly thing, compulsive sexuality. It wreaks havoc on everybody it touches, but it's extra ugly when you're bringing your family into it because the deception of someone who was never supposed to deceive you, the impact of that, Kendra, it's unfathomable. It really is. It's an earth-shattering thing when you find out that your spouse has been doing sexual things and not telling you about it. And for years and years and years, for the most cases, these men were addicted before, I would say 100% of the time, they were addicted before the marriage. So that's my story is I did these things. I was one of those men. I got caught. I went through the whole disclosure process and had to tell her a 14-page document of everything that I've done sexually that she did not know about and ask for forgiveness. And that is a painful process. It goes on for far too long. And the main reason I'm in this space is this is not a rare issue. Yes, technically, by definition, only 18% of men, well, I shouldn't say only, that's a lot of men. 18% of men struggle with compulsive or addictive sexuality. But here's the scary number, and I just saw another update, it's up to 72. 72% of men are engaging in deceptive sexual practices, meaning that, okay, yes, maybe they're not addicted or compulsive, but there's something sexual that they're not telling their wife.
Yeah, definitely a scary number. 72%, you said.
Yeah, it's basically far more likely that your husband's hiding something about his sexuality than it's unlikely. Yeah. And that's scary. And again, I just want to set the record straight for everybody listening. It's not that these men are bad people. I do not think that at all. Every guy in my group is incredible. I can't even say some of the names because the listeners know some of the guys in my groups from television. These are stand-up incredible guys who I think it's up in the 90s. 90% of these men either grew up in a home that lacked attunement or had some sort of unwanted sexual experience in their youth.
So tell us the good news. I know a lot of listeners are probably feeling, oh, it's really likely that my husband is not being honest with me. There's probably a lot of things in the closet. Is there any hope?
Yes, there is, because here's the truth. And I really mean this. Guys are not proud of their deceptive sexual practices. They really want them gone. The truth is, I can't remember what the stat is, but there is a stat on this. When guys are caught, it's almost like 90% of them have done something to try to stop before they got caught. So no one knew anything and they had made efforts. This could be blockers on their phone or computer of certain internet access. This could be if it's an affair partner or an emotional affair, blocking numbers, shutting it down. They don't want to do these things. So if there is a silver lining, that's the most frustrating thing with this. When I got caught, it was like, here I am, looked like, oh, you want your cake and eat it too. No, I do not. My wife is gorgeous. The women that I was with were not even close to attractive, both inside and out, as my wife. So why was I doing it? And that's the thing. This is compulsive. This is the story that women make up about this. And again, I'm not saying the women are crazy. It's a very legitimate story. The story they make up about this is I'm too fat. I'm too old. He's bored with me. I'm bad. And right, that's the story that the women say when they get cheated on. The truth is, when you look at why people cheat, it almost never, there are some exceptions, but I would say very rarely for a person who got married in the first place, which the people who don't get married are the people who have a more, I don't know, liberal view on relationships and sex. The people who get married really do want a monogamous partner where they're preserving the sexual energy for the relationship. That is really what they come in. Here's what I would say is it's the silver lining. It's not these guys' fault. Think about it. We are groomed as men to get women, get money. You'd flip on any TV station and just watch the ads. Here's the thing too. It's not even the guys that are just being roped into it. Women are convinced you need to enhance your appearance so that you are a woman that men want. You need to become a rare and coveted commodity, right? So it's like both genders are participating in this while simultaneously saying, oh, I value monogamy and preserving the sexual energy for the relationship. But let's look at some of these practices, because a lot of these actually are not for the relationship. You getting all dolled up and getting that plastic surgery, who is that for? Maybe it was for your husband. Okay. And if it was, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But was that the motive behind it? And so I think that's the silver lining with this is it looks really sexual. It looks really sick. These guys look like monsters. There's a pretty logical explanation for a lot of what's going on.
Right. Absolutely. And I have to ask, when your wife found out about these things, like how did she respond and why did she want to stay?
Yeah, why in the heck would she stay with a guy? So here's how it went down in a nutshell. I get caught. Obviously, as every woman listening or even every man listening to this can imagine, oh my gosh, nightmare. As the guy, you've been exposed, right? So it's a horrific experience because it's incredibly humiliating, so embarrassing. You feel small and you feel like you lost your partner like that, right? It's, oh crap, I just lost my partner for life. I just destroyed my family, my legacy, right? So it's a horrific experience for the guy, but look at the wife here. Her whole world is turned upside down. Dr. Manwala calls it, I love his analogy. Here's your little cup of water and it's clear and pure. And then I tell you about what I did. And it's a drop, but it's a couple drops of blue food coloring. Your cup of water is blue and it's blue forever. There is no on that water. I can run it through a strainer. It's still going to be blue. It is just, you are now a blue cup of water. That's the best analogy. When you find out that information, that little drop of food color, it changes you forever. You take down the marriage photos, you take off your wedding ring. So even if you decide not to get divorced, the past is dead, right? Every picture you look at, it's, oh, he was flirting with women, sleeping with women 2 months before that. Right. So it just ruins their whole world. But to answer your second question, why would she stay? If guys are truly compulsive and or addicted, there's just something in your body that doesn't feel right. It's not my husband. It just doesn't add up. Like, he loves me. I know he loves me. I know it deep in my bones. That's why they stay. There's this little thing in their body that says something's not adding up. This is not a real reflection of his authentic, true self. And I love when women can have that little bit of grace there. We don't deserve it. We do not deserve it. We lied. We broke our vows. I'm not saying we deserve a second chance. I'm not saying we deserve any, there's nothing we deserve. You have every right to walk away. I just love when they show that grace, because it's like that little inconsistency. Why did this happen? And if you just can have that little bit of space, you can start to realize, I know the women are victims of this, but ladies, the guys are victim of this too. They grow up in a world where you are like, you need to get as many women to want you as possible and as many men to wish they could be you as possible. That is the message in successful male culture. So why are we producing young men who grow up to be full grown men with this problem? Because why would they just flip a switch because they signed a document and put a ring on their finger? That's the thing, is like, what happened to the 3 decades before that day? And that's where I think if they have a little bit of just understanding to understand how could this happen, I think they'll find the answer to that. Now, don't get me wrong, just because you found the answer doesn't take the pain away. But now all of a sudden you can start to realize, okay, my husband was victimized to a degree here too. Then you guys can decide what you want to do with that.
So it sounds like your wife had just enough grace to lean in and have you guys work through that. Can you tell me a little bit about how that process was for you? Was that a long process? Was that back and forth? Take me down that road.
Oh my gosh, we don't have enough time. It's a long process. Here's the thing. When you blow trust like this to the point where you have done something sexual and then maybe even slept with your wife that day and she did not know, and it happened maybe multiple times, she has to look back at that day and connect the dots. May 12th, slept with her earlier that day, came home, slept with me same day. Can you imagine sitting with that information? What I'm saying is, if she decides to stay and you guys decide to, the guy gets into good recovery, because that's another thing for everybody listening. There's a ton of literature and research around having guys get past this so this can get over. And for the people who have been affected by this, the couples end up stronger who make it through. It's a better marriage than ever before. So there's tons of silver lining to all of this. The challenge really is, though, how long and can she do it and can he do it? Because I'll tell you, this is how it usually goes. First year and a half, guys like, forgive me, I'll do anything. After the year and a half, it's like, oh my gosh, how much longer do I have to deal with this? Then they go to year 2.5 and it's, I'm tired of this. I just want a normal life. This is ridiculous. And that's the challenge. At first, the guy will do anything, and then he starts to get tapped out because, Kendra, this is not for the faint of heart. Signing up for this is the hardest thing I have ever done. And I've done some hard stuff, and this eclipses anything I've ever done by tenfold. It's that difficult. So how long does this go? The average, they say, is 3 to 5 years. Now, I don't like timelines because, as you are very familiar, mental health and timelines, I've seen people change in 5 months who put in the work and let go of their attachments and kind of release and surrender and let what has to happen. That's very hard to do. So usually the 35 years is because of how hard that is. I don't like to put timelines on things. I've seen people get to a really great place in a year and a half. I've seen people who it takes 7 to 10 years to bounce back. I think last thing I'd say on that is the confounding variables are what happened before. Had your wife been sexually assaulted prior? Because this is going to hit different now. Has she had body image issues and comparison issues? Because this is going to hit different now because you chose other women over her in her eyes. Even though I know guys, that's not what we think we did, but that's what they think we did. And so all of those factors are a really hard pill to swallow. It's a big pill. It's like a football size pill. And so for them to digest all of that, what we're asking these women to do is, it's unfair. It really is unfair. But what we're asking these women to do is, it will be the hardest thing they've ever done, without question.
Absolutely. And it seems like in this case with this addiction, it's so much more vulnerable on both sides. All addictions have their own challenges, but we're talking about something like you mentioned, what things you didn't say specifically your wife, but I'm assuming your wife felt these things too. What does this say about me? How is this related to me? Like just being very insecure, and we're wondering. And then, of course, going back to that trust issue, like how difficult that must be. And you said swallowing a football size pill, like both sides, it must be so hard. And you're saying 3 to 5 years, this is, or maybe longer. This is not something simple.
And let me tell you this, you will feel every bit of those 3 to 5 years. This is not something that's like she gets triggered one Thursday a month. No, it will be in the first 2.5 years. If she is not activated every day by something, it could be any, think about it. You go to the gym. Is he actually at the gym? You go to here, you go to the ATM and get $200 out. Why did he need $200? These poor ladies, it's just like everything's on the table now. And here's the hardest part too, is they can't even leave the marriage because this will follow them to the next relationship. It's so unfair what this does to women. It really is. It's not fair. And at the same time, I think our culture really needs to come to terms with this issue, because I look at a lot of those numbers and I think that's BS. It's higher. This is just, I'm a guy and I hang around guys. Like, objectification of women has gotten entirely out of control. The availability of and wide practice use of pornography, strip clubs, now sugar babies. A lot of people don't know about this, but these websites are legal. You sign up, you give them a donation, which has nothing to do with sex. It's all things. She signs the agreement, you sign the agreement. It's completely legal. And then there's this expectation that's not written anywhere that she will have sex with you once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month, whatever. And these websites are widely practiced. OnlyFans. A lot of people have heard of OnlyFans. Here's a website similar to Instagram or Facebook where you can go scroll profiles and just pay someone to send you explicit content. I think we need to talk about this as a culture, because this problem is not shrinking. It's ever growing. And with AI, it's getting worse.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to something else you said earlier, because I know the statistics and there's some debate on what they are, but I also think they're really high when it comes to sexual abuse. And a lot of people that are doing these things, that are having these affairs, have had some type of sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's 90% fall into one of either category. Either they had some, and again, it's not always sexual abuse. It can be an unwanted sexual experience. So my first one, when I was 4 years old, he was a friend, but I repeatedly said, no, I don't want to do this. I grew up in a LDS household. And so I knew enough from my parents that this was not something I should be doing with him. Like I said, no, he threatened me. I went and told his mom afterward. My point was, that doesn't look like sexual abuse because it's pretty common for friends to experiment, at a young age. But again, if you didn't want it, we need to examine that because it sends a very specific message to that young boy's brain when he gets violated after telling his friend, this is something I don't want to do. So these aren't things we can dismiss, but yes, unwanted sexual touching of any kind, unwanted comments. So I think we need to expand our understanding of, I don't like sexual abuse because it's pretty specific. I think we really need to examine how much did you want to see that pornography that you were shown?
Yeah.
The truth is most kids didn't want to see it. They stumbled across it. Someone showed it to them. So that's a huge category, is these sexual messages are being digested far too early. And it's even more subtle. I want everybody to understand how subtle this is. Home Alone. It's one of the more popular movies, Home Alone. He's up in his brother's room when he's out of town. He's looking through his brother's stuff and he has a Playboy and he looks at it and he says, ew, gross. But yes, Macaulay Culkin did not find the porn attractive in that clip, but his brother had it and his brother had it hidden. It's stuff like this that we can't underestimate what's going on. As much as that is a family-friendly film, the Santa Claus, same thing. Opening scene in the Santa Claus, he says, hey, where's the president of our company? Oh, he's back there. He's dressed as Santa with his secretary on his lap. This is a Disney movie. So my point is, we laugh off how sexual men are. So there's that whole category. But the other piece too is the number one cause of compulsive sexuality: parents who lack attunement. So if you're a parent and you're listening to this, the number one cause of a child latching on to addictive and compulsive behavior is a lack of attunement, right? So if the kid doesn't feel treated like a person and he's being treated like a pet or a trophy, which is how parents treat their kids, more and more you force them to be something that they're, without asking them, the higher the likelihood. And that's what happened to me. My life was micromanaged by everyone basically, and I hated it. And I turned into a monster. So if you don't want your kids to turn into a monster, treat them like a person and ask them questions. No one asked me how I felt, ever. I don't recall anyone ever checking in on my life. So those are two important factors that lead to this. An over-sexualized culture, which, like I said, it's not just sex abuse. It's anything being introduced that the kid did not invite into their life. But then the biggest one is a lack of attunement from parents.
I love that you brought that up because I think that could speak to a lot of parents. We're not trying to harm our kids, do any of those things, but it's hard to sometimes check in about how they're doing, wondering what they want, giving them a voice instead of micromanaging, especially today because we are really big on micromanaging children.
So an example of trauma is getting your kid to go to Harvard Medical School. And a parent would probably listen to this and say, that's not trauma. I'm being a good parent. Does the kid want to go to medical school? Does he want to go to Harvard? Did you ask? And that's the thing, is like, to most parents, a successful kid is somebody who is worth a couple $1,000,000, has a very stable career, has a vacation home here and there, drives 2 German automobiles, and is some high up in a company. And if you force your kid to become that, when your kid wanted to be a artist or a poet or a musician, and you force them to become something they're not, there will be consequences there, I can assure you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind if I back up a little bit about something you said earlier?
Yes, go for it.
You talked about pornography being a part of this, and there's this wide range of, oh, it's totally normal, it's okay.
Oh my
Like,
gosh,
and I
yes.
work with a lot of clients that are like, it feels like too much. It feels like there's a line that he's gone over, but I'm not really sure. Maybe it's just normal. A lot of the women that I'm working with. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love speaking to this because it's something that is not being discussed. So first off, let me point out the obvious. When that industry came about, it was a slam dunk. Men and women, I don't care who you are, everyone's going to want to look at a naked. We know that about humans. We just know that. So there's nothing inherently wrong with these men or women who are looking at it. We know our biology is captivated by that. It's part of our design. There's nothing we can really do about that. It's baked into our DNA. Sex is a biological need. Attraction is not always something that we can kind of control. So I just want to point out the obvious is the reason that industry has so much money is we know people are going to enjoy it. And that's not up for debate. No one would debate that. It doesn't matter where you stand on any of it. We all understand that's biologically something that someone will like. Now, there's lots of things that are fun. Heroin, cocaine, meth, but we don't do those. Well, why not? So that's my rebuttal to people who are trying to normalize pornography is just because it feels good. There's a lot of things that feel good that we don't do because they have a whole long-term negative effect, right? We're not using cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin because we know that if we abuse those things in the long run, there's going to be some very serious consequences. Pornography is no different. When you're putting that into your brain, it's having an effect. It's having an effect, absolutely, on so many fronts. I can't even begin to it. You guys can all do the research, but it affects your brain in more ways than you would ever imagine, ever. It's just act of watching someone do something sexual or people have sex who don't know that you're watching them. That concept of voyeurism alone does something very powerful to the brain. So here's my conclusion on the whole thing. It's not consent if they're getting money. So let's remove the money. How much porn would still exist if they weren't getting paid? I think my guess would be not a lot because all these women are getting paid. I don't consider that consent. That is sex slavery, in my opinion. Just because you're giving them money doesn't mean that they want to do what they're doing. Okay. So that's not consent. So that's problem number one. So then the argument is, Roland, what if it is consensual? What if they're not getting paid? What if it's their sexual expression? Okay. Let's just make sure their mental health is open to that. I understand that people can express themselves sexually in different ways. I would love to make sure that they're actually doing that from an authentic place, because I just don't think there'd be a lot of people who want to be seen that way by strangers for free. And if they are, I would question what happened to that person leading up to it, just to make sure. But I do think if we really boil it all the way down to people who really wanted to show their naked bodies for free to people, and they were totally mentally sound about the consequences of all of those actions, I think the number would shrink tremendously. So that's got to make you just wonder, are you participating then in some level of unwanted sexual slavery in a way, right? That's what it sure looks like to me. Then there's the final argument, which is, Roland, what about AI? These are fake women. They never existed. So what's the problem there now? What's it doing to the observer then? Because to me, this is not a victimless addiction. If it's a real person, we have to question what this is doing to that person. And then if you're an observer, you need to question what it's doing to you. You know, what impact is that having on the brain, you knowing that you are having a sexual experience with a fake woman who never existed, right? Like, I know that's, oh, we're not doing anything wrong. She's AI. Yeah, but your brain knows that she's fake. So are you going to potentially lose interest in real women? Like, I just think we need to think a little bit more about this. So to me, is this normal? Yeah, it's normal, but normal doesn't mean good. Normal just means most of the people are doing it. So myself, I have taken the position of, I don't want it in my life because I think it's going to create a harmful world for my daughter to live in. And I just don't want it to do what it's doing to my brain either. So that's my stance on it. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do with their sexuality. I think if you really sit down with the facts, I think it's hard to justify its use.
Oh, absolutely. So you mentioned you have a daughter. Tell us a little bit about what you do to teach her, or what you do as a parent to make sure she thrives and she's not in this future relationship where suddenly
Yes.
she's facing these same things that your wife did.
Yeah. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. She was getting all dolled up for a birthday party, and she was just in her PJs. We were playing on the ground some game, and she went off, get all ready for the birthday party. And she came out to the couch where I was on my computer, and she struck a pose. And my daughter's beautiful. She's just a stunning looking little 5-year-old. We got stopped by everybody we walked past because she is so pretty. She strikes a pose, and I am, oh my gosh. And after she left, I was sitting and I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I screwed her up. How come we were just playing together on the ground 14 minutes before, and I wasn't enamored by her beauty? And then now she's wearing her dress and her hair's up, and now her dad's, oh my gosh. So she's experiencing this increased level of my admiration, my love for her, the wow factor. I can see it in my eyes. What's that going to do long term? If that's what she thinks she needs to do to get men to look that way at her, is she more likely to repeat that? I would say yes. So what am I doing as a parent? Being mindful of that, right? And so now what I try to do is I tell her how pretty she looks all the time. I ask her how she feels. I take more of an interest in her feelings and her perception than I do the actual kind of physical manifestation of such things, right? So I'm more curious about her life force than I am about what we're seeing downstream. So see the thing downstream and say, oh, wow, sweetie, that's so cool. And then go upstream and say, what makes green your favorite color? So like just get her to be curious about her life force rather than, hey, are you impressed with this thing that I drew? Because I think if we keep playing in that realm, we're missing the point. And I think that's why our society has just become so materialistic, is everything we focus on is like what spits out at the end. But what's most important about humans is the engine and the life force inside of them, right? That's what we should be curious about. And I don't think we do enough of that. And I think where we find ourselves as a society, everyone always says, oh, the world's going, well, yeah, absolutely. And it's your fault. Every single person who says that, we're participating in, we're taking less interest in the soul inside of an individual, and we're becoming obsessed with their actions when their actions are just the byproduct of a lot of man-made stuff. There's nothing divine about it.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense, what you're saying about your daughter. But what about a son? What if you had a son and he was just showing these
Yeah.
signs of being way too drawn to women or just really curious? What would you do then?
Yeah. So that's going to be a challenging one. You know, the reason my wife and I have chosen, and probably will forever live in very small communities. We live in Sedona, Arizona, which is, it says technically 9,000, but that's not true. It's 4,000 people. And the reason we did it is it's not a materialistic place. There's no industry or work here. You come here because you want to be here and you want to find a way to make it work. And I would say for raising boys is a bit different. I think you need to be conscientious of the environment that you're placing them in. A lot of the corruption that happened to me was just being around too many rich people. We were the poor family in a very wealthy area, and that had a massive impact on me because the wealthy men at church got more attention than the poor guys. And I picked up on that as a young man. And so I became infatuated with money. And then I found out that money is just half the battle. It's also getting women to throw themselves at you and talk about you. So I got infatuated with that. But that's the point, is I think with young men, boys, I think the environment has way more to do with a lot of what their parents can do. I think young men, especially ambitious young men, they're on the hunt for how to become impressive. They're on the hunt for how to become this respected member of society. At least me and the guys in my groups are. And so we have to be very careful, because if they're assessing their environment, we need to be careful of what they see. So that's my number one advice for you, for young boys. I think the second thing that we can do is treat them like girls. There's studies that show, you've probably heard this, parents of young boys, the mothers look at them at a fraction of the time that they look at their daughters. And there's speculation that it's like this, that it's a boy. And so in your being, you're like, oh, he's going to be okay. He will take care of himself because he's a boy. And that is a very toxic assumption. And that usually goes throughout the first 6 years of their life. They're treated ever so subtly different than a little girl, where she's, oh, the poor thing, the world's going to be so mean to her. I need to build her up. Boys get less of that. It's, oh, he's going to be okay. And it's a subtle thing, just a fraction of a second. But at the same time, how does that all add up? So I think they're a byproduct of our environment, and part of that environment is the environment that you're creating. I needed just as much help as my sister did. I don't know why people felt like I didn't, just because I started working out and cussing and being angry and trying to look all masculine. Isn't that a sign of me being hurt and insecure?
That's a great point that I hadn't really thought of. I actually haven't heard of that study. I'll have to go check it out. But I have a little boy myself, a 9-year-old. I have two boys. And I wonder how they're going to do when it seems like our culture is so sexualized, like you talk about. Is there any hope? My husband speaking to challenges that he's had and just how we're going to get through this. So talk to me a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about those clients that you work with. You hear their stories all the time. You have your own personal experiences. I guess going back to that hope part, what do you do to help them actually heal and not just come back 10 years later and, oh, they've had more affairs, or they're looking at a bunch of
Yes.
pornography again.
So our world is 3 steps back. So if you're not taking 3 steps forward, your son or husband or friend is probably being sucked into an abyss where he will be tempted to make compromised decisions, right? So I say that because we need to be taking 3 steps forward every day to counteract the 3 steps backward that our society is trying to take us in. I would prefer that people be taking 4 or 5 steps forward. That way we are actually getting further away from the abyss rather than just kind of treading water. So that's how I always like to frame it. But here's the thing. Humans are wired for connection. We know this, you know this, that there's endless amounts of evidence to show that our own needs can't even be met without connecting with others, that we regulate through connecting with others, right? So we are wired to connect. And I'm saying this because what happens when you are assessing your surroundings so that you can connect, and they care about money, and they care about hot women, they care about, that's what I'm saying is these poor guys think they're doing it right. The guys in my groups do not think they're cheating. They do because they're hiding it and they're concealing it. They're not telling anyone. They know that culturally they're doing something wrong that their wife or their friends or their religious community will not approve of. However, their being is assessing the world around, and it says, well, I feel called to be influential. I feel called to be admired, a respectable member of my society. I want to be remembered. I don't want to be forgotten. So what happens when you assess the world around you and the people that everyone look at 50 Shades of Grey. Women were struck by 50 Shades of Grey, and it's a billionaire with an intimacy disorder. And he's attractive. Are you kidding me? He's a sex addict. That's what he is. That's like sex addiction's an intimacy disorder. It's a disconnection, a withdrawal from connection. That's what it is. In my cases, it's usually a distrust of others. A lot of successful men grow through childhood and understand that they are going to have to get their needs met and that they can't not rely on anybody else to get their needs met. And a lot of that's because successful men have high standards. And so they start to understand that the world's not going to give it to them, that they're going to have to take it. And so the problem is this whole recipe starts. And these guys, their being is just trying to, in this world, become a guy that people admire. And when we are watching James Bond sleep with 3 to 4 women every episode, every movie, he's sleeping with multiple women. He's not calling them back. They're not getting engaged. The next movie, he's on to another 3 women, and he's got money. He drives a nice car. He's got 6-pack abs. What are these messages that we are sending these boys over and over? We're telling them a pretty specific message. Get money, get a 6-pack, get women to like you, get men to envy you. And so my point is, when we're talking about especially the guys in my groups, these are beautiful, normal men who do not think that what they're doing is cheating. They genuinely feel like, I am a driven, impactful leader, and this is what we have to do. I have to get wanted. I have to get people to want to be me. I have to show them that I have everything together and that I'm as close to perfect as a human can be. That's what we have defined as a successful male from a media, cultural kind of branding standpoint. Now, that's not entirely true. If we look at a lot of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, and if we really look at the people who were celebrated and remembered, they actually weren't like James Bond. They actually did something. So there's enough evidence there that in my groups, I can change the men to start finding what is real admiration, what's real respect, what's real. If you really are a celebrated member of society, who are those people? Because look what happened to Tiger Woods. How much respect does he get? So that's the point, is like the way that the media and movies have sold us as the ideal way to the ideal male is actually not what true human beings consider an ideal person. The people who are the most celebrated are the ones that don't bend the truth. They never compromise their integrity, ever, right? They stand up for what's right, even if they get crucified for it. Those are the people we write about. In the story of Christ, there's a reason that story's been written about and remembered for so long. It's a story about one of the most admirable gentlemen who's ever walked the earth. And it was so impactful. We're talking about it thousands and thousands of years later, the messages that came from that. So my point is, there's enough evidence to show that what people really admire and what's really going to fill you is actually a different recipe. And so for the guys who get into my program, I can sell them on that in about 90 days.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you do this work because it is, as you have showed with your statistics, is obviously so needed. I do have
Yes.
one question for you, and I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but I am based in Idaho, at least right now, and there's a big Christian community here. I've heard plenty of statistics about it, but can you speak to pornography and especially Christian religions, or maybe even the shame
Yeah,
aspect?
there's a book written by LDS men that is literally titled "Why More LDS Men Struggle with Pornography Than Other Religions or the General Pop." And it's literally an LDS therapist who wrote the book. So, and it's an interesting read because there's a lot of science behind it. I'm not going to get into any of that, but the point is, here's what we know about humans. Mel Robbins wrote about this in her brand new book, The Let Them Theory. I don't know if you've read it yet. The book is just blowing up. It's going viral, and I love that for her. For those of you who are really into more advanced stuff, it's a very basic book. However, there's one thing that she says in the book that I do love, and she cites a bunch of the research that came out of Harvard, which is human beings want to feel good. It's just part of humans. And so when they are exposed to something that makes them feel a pleasurable feeling, it is something that they want to do. And here's the other thing we know about humans. When you tell them not to do something, and this is bizarre, it doesn't add up. You would think it wouldn't work this way. But when you tell humans not to do something, not only do they not listen, but it actually makes them want to do the pleasurable thing that they're told they can't do more. Whereas when they can do it freely and it's just more of, hey, what do you want your legacy to have added up to? And what kind of mark do you want to have left on this place when you're done? Then they won't do it because they're like, I don't want to further objectify women. I don't want to make this place suck for my daughters. So when they're told you can't do it, they actually want to do it. And so that's the essence of that book. And there's a couple other books written about it, but this is a more of a Christian problem than non-Christian problem. And it's not just because the non-Christian men are not trying to stop, because a lot of them actually have the same moral issue with it, even though they don't have a particular religious belief that prohibits it. But when you're told you can't do it, our biology does not like that. Humans don't like to have rules and be told what to do. And again, that's where religion, in my opinion, is very often misunderstood. When I read the books, I do not hear a book that says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I hear a book that says, do you want to do what you've been sent here to do and feel the feelings that come with that? This is the way to do it. I don't hear any rules when I read the book. When I read the Bible, I just see, hey, here's a series of stories that made men unconscious and destroyed their lives and led to nothing but suffering and insatiable satisfaction. And here's a bunch of stories of how you can actually achieve fulfillment. And so again, I think for the listeners who are struggling and making this, because I feel like a lot of addicts are making this into something that's making it hard to recover from. And I feel like if we just chill out for a second, look at this, it makes a ton of sense. All of it makes sense. Even the addictive and compulsive and the fact that you can't quit, like that makes sense too. There's data and science to prove all of this. So what I would say is chill out. It makes sense. You're not a bad person. There's a very great explanation for all of this. Pornography should have never been legalized in the first place, right? We are all a victim of just an unregulated industry that just should have never been allowed to exist, especially in the unregulated sense that it has become. So that's what I would say to everybody is this makes sense. Let's just be careful not to turn it into a sin that's just really not what's going on here. The world's beating you up, just like all of the stories that we've heard over the thousands of years in every religious book. The world is wreaking its havoc on people. All the books said it wasn't going to be easy. So again, I think we just need to calm down a second, understand, we are battling something that everything in your body is going to want. So I think if you understand it that way and we just start approaching it a little bit differently from a legacy standpoint, I think we could start to see real sobriety. Because otherwise, if you're going to tell yourself not to want to do these novel sexual experiences, guys, you're going to lose. They feel good. They feel fantastic. We all know that. Everybody knows that. God knows that. That's not the question here. The question is this sustainable? And is this going to harm people and generations after you? And the answer for a lot of the cases is yes. So I think that's where sobriety is achieved. Because we know your wife's not enough to get sober. Your kids are not enough to get sober. God's not enough to get sober. If it was, we wouldn't have so many devoutly religious individuals doing all this. What's enough to get you sober, though? And I write about this in my book, Legacy. I think we cannot look at ourselves in the mirror knowing that we are contributing to a worse world. That gets guys sober.
I love that you talked about that. sounds like you help people, whether it's your children, whether it's people in your group, you help them understand, you didn't say it this way, but their why, really digging a little bit deeper and not just going to the shame and all those things. Like, I know that there's this deep
And you
work.
know why? Because that was not what was done to me. I was shamed for this. I was put down for this. I was arrested for this when I was 14 years old. The world told me, we don't want you. And what do you think that did to me? So that's why I'm trying to change the tone. Let's stop calling these guys names. Guys, this makes so much sense. I don't get why everyone's so flabbergasted. I'm shocked we have as much monogamy as we have. I'm shocked by it in the world we live in. So that's what I would say. That's my heart behind this, was what was said to me by people who cared and loved me. Okay. I'm not saying they made it worse. So if you're listening to this and you have kids or a husband, or you're somebody who struggles with this yourself, it's okay. This makes so much sense. There's nothing wrong with you. You are victims of this. The sex should have never been turned into what it is. We are all victims of this, and it's tormenting all of us. And I think we need to spend a lot more time looking at it. I'm not even just talking about sex. I'm talking about sex appeal. Guys, we've got to stop doing this. The surgeries, the lip fillers up 990% in 1 year. 10 times more lip fillers being used in 1 year because of Instagram and filter. Guys, we've got to get a grip on this. I don't like where this is trending.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you're speaking to that. It sounds like asking about the why or that legacy that you're leaving, but also having compassion. I know one thing that helped me was all these clients hearing their stories. And most people don't get that. Like, I get to hear the background of in all of them, but also recognizing that we all have our own thing that we do to cope. And pornography is just one of those things. I especially love sugar, and some people laugh, and I'm like, no, like, we all have our thing, but like, how hard is that for me to control? And just having some empathy and some compassion, recognizing we're all going to our one thing when we feel overwhelmed or tired or
Yes.
lonely. You know what I mean?
It's
But
process addiction. That's what this is. It's sex and porn addiction. That's an inaccurate description. It's a process addiction, meaning we become dependent or addicted to or compulsive around thought processes. And that's why you can't just stop doing this. It's going to shift into something else. We gravitate towards these things. And that's why I'm saying, stop judging yourself. You just gravitated towards one that society labeled as extremely offensive and personal. But workaholism, no one's trying to stop that. How offensive is it that you're choosing to spend time away from your family? Why aren't we talking more about that? That's my point. I think humans gotten really weird about the things that we judge and don't judge. And I think we should just stop together and really just analyze the way we live. Because I think a lot of the way we live, wasteful, materialistic, shallow, like Shakespeare said, life is but a poor player amongst the stage, shouting in fury with a life signifying nothing. And then he leaves the stage, essentially summarizing what we all do. We go up, we cause a ruckus, judge people, judge ourselves, work our faces off, and then we die and really don't do anything that meaningful. And I think it's just getting worse and worse. I appreciate you bringing up the sugar, because it's sugar, it's social media. I feel bad that these guys get beat up on when they gravitated towards something that honestly makes a ton of sense that they would gravitate towards. But because it was sexual, oh my gosh, they're once a cheater, always a cheater. Stay away from this guy. He's this, he's that. Meanwhile, everybody else is engaging in process addictions. But because society hasn't labeled those as disgusting or perverted, now it's like, oh, I just need to spend less time on Instagram. But in the end, it's the same thing. It's a dopaminergic practice that, in my opinion, doesn't add that much to your life. And how clean are you from this exact same problem? I'm not discrediting the ugliness of this particular issue. I'm not discrediting that. I'm just saying, I think before we go judging it and labeling these men, if we take a look in the mirror, you'll see a lot of commonalities with them and with everybody
absolutely.
else.
Yeah, you have so many wonderful things to say. I just want to keep picking your brain. But the last question I have for you is, a lot of my listeners are women, but those women or even men that are struggling, what are those first steps? What can they do if they suspect something in their spouse or it's in them personally? Like, it feels so far away that there's any sort of help, and it just feels like they're going to drown into that. What do they do?
Yes, great question. First steps, I would just say, is listen to some of the podcasts out there. There's a ton on sex and porn and love addiction. So just get familiar, jump onto YouTube. I have so many guests on my YouTube channel and my podcast, and all sorts of women, men, and people in religious organizations. I've had everybody come on my podcast. So that's why I'd say first start, just kind of listen and start to figure out the inner workings of this, and that'll usually point you in the next direction. The very next step after that, I would say, is if you go to itap.com, that's where you can find sex addiction therapists. I always tell people, when in doubt, give them a call. Just schedule one appointment. And so many sex addiction therapists, CSATs, certified sex addiction therapists, they would love to get on a single phone call with you and just assess the situation and let you know where this stands. So that's what I would tell everybody is, first, there's tons of great content out there in the sex and porn addiction field. The reason I say podcasts is podcasts won't be censored. If you're on YouTube and Google, sometimes they will, like my YouTube channel hardly shows up for a lot of people because of the restrictions, because of the words sex and pornography. So if you go to the podcasts and just listen to some of the sex addiction podcasts, I think that's where I would tell most people to start, because it'll be very eye-opening, especially if you listen to mine, because I don't get into a whole lot of the treatment details. Mine's more like, why is this a problem in the first place? And I think that's where I would suggest to people is just roll around in there a little bit and it'll become very clear to you. You listen to 3 or 4 or 5 of my podcast episodes, you'll probably know what you need to do next.
Yeah. And can you tell us what your podcast is called so they can?
Yeah, it's called the Sex Addiction Podcast for High Achievers and Entrepreneurs. Now, that all being said, yes, obviously my target audience are high achieving, successful men. But I would say I have 40% of the people who buy my book and listen to my podcast are females married to successful men. And when they listen to this, they're like, oh my gosh, this is freaking husband. These are his exact process addictions. So yeah, it's the Sex Addiction Podcast for High Achievers and Entrepreneurs. But I know therapists and women are going to be listening to it. So every time that I recorded an episode, I'm always mindful of that.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll check that out. We'll put it in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on, Roland. You had a lot of things that speak to a lot of us, and it gives us hope, and also recognize that there's something that we need to change in this culture. And it begins in our parenting and in our marriage to make those changes. And I really
100%.
appreciate you speaking to that. So thank you.
I do. I appreciate the opportunity. This is something that's so close to me. I've been crawling out of it since I was a boy. And so all the parents listening to this, wives listening to this, husbands listening to this, single people listening to this, please don't ignore this. It progresses like all addictions. And so if you think that it's just a thing, the likelihood of it progressing to other levels that you probably never imagined it would progress to, stats show it's going to get there. This is not something to ignore. But thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity of shining light on such an important issue.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, please head over to our website, fulfillmenttherapy.org, to see new updates on our blog, our courses, and to connect with us and get our weekly emails. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you back here every Monday and Thursday.